Next up, we have our first panel of the day. So for this keynote panel, we are going to be looking at how can the airport industry leverage collaboration, innovation, and technology to drive growth and revolutionize the travel ecosystem. And we have four powerhouses ready to come on stage. Please welcome back Mr. Ayman Aboabah, CEO of Riyadh Airports. We have Jonny Andersen, CEO of Curacao Airport. Curacao. Sorry, that's the Geordie accent coming out there. Emre Serpen, Director of Business Consulting, Aviation Principal at Publicis Sapient. And finally, last but not least, Amit Rikhy, President and CEO of CAG Holdings. Gentlemen, you should have your microphones. Oh, you've got microphones either on your head or next to you. Pleasure to have you here. I'm going to get you each, with the exception of Ayman, because you've already been here. So we will start at the end. Jonny, to give a very brief overview of your role, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, everybody can hear me. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonny Andersen. I'm the CEO of Curacao Airport. That's in the Caribbean, you know, turquoise water, sun, sand, and everything. But I'm also the chair of the Dutch Caribbean Airport. That's 6 airports in the Caribbean. So I'm working a lot with connectivity. I'm working a lot with improving safety and operations within the Caribbean. And that's really my role, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you, Jane.
Pleasure to have you here. Next, we have Amit.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Pleasure to be here. I've got this. Amit Rikhy. I'm co-founder and CEO of CAG Holdings, which stands for Carlisle Airport Group. We're the airport investment development platform within Carlisle, the global private equity firm. So we typically look to develop airports, invest in airports, work with our management teams to improve airports, and work across the entire ecosystem, not only just sort of in the physical infrastructure of the airports, but in the community and along with our airport stakeholders.
Thank you. Emre.
Hello, I'm Emre Serpen, Aviation Principal for Publicis Sapient. It's a digital transformation company engaged primarily in customer experience, retail, operational efficiencies. Currently working with several airlines and airports. But previously, 40 years in my career, I established most aviation practices for leading companies like Sabre, like ICF, SHNE, Wipro, ACL, long history. Also, I've been in Saudi Arabia. I was the head of strategy in Saudi Cargo. So very nice to see you, sir. And look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much. And of course, we have Ayman, who we met earlier. So thank you for returning to the stage for this discussion. If I can begin, Amit, I'll start with you. And if you can begin by explaining to us, how can established airports effectively work with tech startups and disruptive enterprises to drive innovation and growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the areas that we look for is we look to create seamless passenger journeys through our airports, through our facilities. And that really means involving the entire supply chain and involving the entire ecosystem. So, obviously at the tipping point is, at the tip of the spear are our airline partners. And really understanding what our airline partners need and how they want to operate most efficiently through our facilities is super important. So working with them first and foremost and understanding their needs, how they process their passengers, what kind of customer experience that they're looking for, and then trying to supplement that customer experience from the time that a passenger leaves their home or their office or wherever they may be to the time they get to the curb, all the way through our facilities and onto the aircraft. So an example of that is really working with the various disruptive technology providers to figure out how do we communicate to passengers before they even leave their home or place of business and on their way to the airport, and integrating that along with what the airlines want when the airlines want their customers to arrive, the processes that the airlines want their customers to go through, whether it's biometric check-in, whether it's bag tagging, and then clearing that customer all the way through security onto electronic e-gates and self-boarding. One of the things that we aspire to do is we aspire to be as frictionless in the passenger journey. And by that, what I mean is we try to provide as few touch points as possible, but those touch points are available. So if a passenger needs that touch point is available to the passenger. But if the passenger doesn't need that touch point, we try to make that journey as frictionless as possible. And that is, and doing that by integrating the various service providers onto a common platform and working with them day in and day out is super important in how we do that.
Jonny, I'd like to bring you in the conversation here because we hear about that seamless experience thanks to innovation in technology. From your perspective as CEO of one of the airports in the Caribbean and chair of the Dutch Caribbean Cooperation of Airports, what can we do to leverage collaboration, innovation and technology to drive growth in inter-island travel and transform the travel ecosystem in Dutch Caribbean?
Thank you, Jane. Most of the passengers that are coming to the Caribbean, I'm talking now very much in general, you have several parts of course, but they come from the North American market. And the North American market, they stay there, the passengers from the guests from the North American market, they stay there for maybe 3 days, maybe up to a week and so on. And that time for them is really precious. So what they are looking for is seamless, they are looking for a touch point, less is better. So of course what we are focusing on is trying to get, when we get them off the plane, how quickly can we get them to the beach? Kind of in Curacao, where I am running the airport there, we have a saying, or our vision is like 2 hours from you leave the aircraft until your feet is hitting the beach in the sand. And to do that, you need technology to do that. And specifically it comes to, one thing is the, processes that the airlines, at the airport controls, but you also have the agencies of the, immigration, customs, and so on. And those are the things that we are really focusing on when it comes to technology. We have just introduced immigration, call it gates, e-gates, or self-service, and so on, but also pre-clearance in a way, digital pre-clearance with digital IDs and so on in Curacao. And several of the other airports in the Caribbean are working on the same thing. It's all about making that travel as easy as possible to kind of come to your precious destination and enjoy that time that you have there for as long as you can. And that's really the focus on how we kind of are looking at technology today.
Emre, something that was touched on the last session was obviously the issue of political and geopolitical trends. There are wars going on all around the world. What happens to the industry when the airspace closes and the airlines need to react? How is it managed?
Well, it's really a bit of a shock, isn't it, when it happens overnight, the Russian airspace closes, and if you are like Finnair, if you are several airlines impacted, what do you do? Because it's extremely complex. So, yesterday we heard from Willie Walsh, the role of IATA, working with different airlines, communicating what needs to be done and so on. Eurocontrol, of course, is very important, their relationship with different airlines and airports. And ACI plays a big role in this. So from a passenger viewpoint, some airports, they cooperate well with airlines, with statutory bodies, like for instance, Heathrow Airport during Brexit, to minimize the impact to the passengers. Excellent relationships with airlines, with regulatory bodies. IGA, Istanbul Airport, it's just the middle of things. There is Ukraine North and South issues. They communicate seamlessly with airlines, real-time data exchange to minimize impact. On the cargo side, it's also complex because we've seen what happened during, COVID. The supply chains, global supply chains, now you are becoming nearshore. So there the issue is how do you minimize impact on the supply chain? So there is a lot of work going on with FIATA, working with airlines, working with airports, so that the flows are maintained.
Is there a way to alleviate those trade wars, though? I mean, is there a blueprint to how it does work? I know GCC handle it quite well, but
Yes.
is that something that could be rolled out?
Yes, yes. I think GCC also very effective in terms of facilitating that. I think in terms of a strategic disposition, when you are, for instance, let's take Liège Airport is a good example. I think with the Cayano relationship, Liège now grew into one of the biggest cargo airports in Europe. But when you have this type of disruption, then the flows, it goes actually a lot through Middle East, through Dubai hub, and I'm sure it will be in the Saudi. So you have these diversions. So if you are an airport, you need to have business continuity and resilience plans, and you predict. And when these things happen, you can react quickly.
Ayman, how important would you say this idea of being intermodal really needs to be in terms of playing into the efficiency of the aviation industry across the board?
Well, the geopolitical challenges is endless, and it will happen there, and here somewhere. And I'm not gonna, I'm optimistic, but we believe it's part of the life, and that is happening. And whether it's high and low, it's just ups and down. But we need to have an agility, and that's what we're talking about. So I believe that there will be three major direct impact that we see it: the aerospace, the economy, and the markets related to the economical firm that get penalized because they are part of that ally or this ally. And that is impacting even the industry much more than the aerospace. So you may fix the airspace as we did in the GCC. We have better alignment. We have the clear, failover plan with the backup disasters, and we have all of that as an agility, as having that type of a new model of operation from the aerospace and the airport as well. But that have been addressed with this model, having that agility and building up the business continuity related to multiple routes with a clear alternative hubs to accommodate wherever it takes from serving those passing aircraft. But there are two factors today, I think. I see it's a much more risk related to the economical impact related to those firms. So the airport should take in their shoulder today to have more multiple player in order to offer those services, so that prohibited or a penalized company can be replaced with different alternative that you have it in the airport itself. And that's another dimension. The third one, it's the cyber attack. Because whenever there are a geopolitical, it's associated with a cyber attack. And that cyber attack might hit everyone, like what we have, previously in last summer. So the point here that I believe in cyber attack, there should be a collaborative effort in the airport level, in the ACI level, as well as in the IATA level, in the airline, to ensure that we have the right backup and we have the right backup plan that took place, not to, block the whole flow of that air connectivity. And I think we in Saudi Arabia succeed, thank you, alhamdulillah, we succeed to manage that cyber attack that hit the passenger information system that, blocked most of the airport in the world. And I think we have just, a little slowness converting to the backup system, having the manual process that have been applied with the risk scenario, with the drills that have been applied. And we just do a drill in Riyadh just 2 days back, full drill on a system that goes down. So how can we'll deal with that? So alhamdulillah, successfully. The impact does not take more than 10 minutes in general in the whole flight schedule. So that's accepted and tolerated within the 15 minutes of a slot adherence. So coming to the point, so I think geopolitical challenges is hitting every time, and it will happen frequently, depend on the political situation around us, but we need to have the right agility, the collaborative effort, and the right backup contingency plan.
You mentioned there the kind of cyber threat, and security is a very broad subject. We can talk about terrorism threats, passenger congestion, and this is something I know, Emre, you're very passionate about in terms of, identifying the problems or those threats a lot quicker? Is it technology that we need to employ to identify these issues?
Well, I don't know if you, that will tell you about my age now. The Total Recall movie, where everyone walks through, and then, the kind of for airports, the challenge is how do you identify the threat by not inconveniencing 99.9% people, okay? And now there is, of course, great, advances in that. I think yesterday we've heard Dubai Airport in terms of facial technology. Your face is your passport in future. The blockchain, I think, is very important in terms of, because you can track what's happening to that passenger throughout his journey, and it cannot be tampered. So there is a lot of efforts, and I think this is going to accelerate. And at some point in future, not right now, I think what you said earlier, in 20 minutes you are into the beach. This is what everyone wants. You get to your aircraft quickly, get off aircraft quickly, do this seamlessly, but without compromising the security. And on the cargo side is the same. If you are sending salmon from Norway to Japan, you need to know that it hasn't been tampered. So there is great opportunity there. So in terms of then, the airport, as you say, collaboration with regulatory authorities, you have a seamless information exchange between airport and the authorities. That means the architecture is very important, open architecture, the API exchange. The build-up of the technology needs to take into account the security, cybersecurity exchanges, and that's a lot of airports now is thinking that and moving towards that.
Jonny, the things that we can't predict, the weather. And we've seen what's happening in Florida at the moment, which is, not too far from the Caribbean. What kind of impact does that have, and what strategies do you employ to counteract the knock-on effect?
No, it's really devastating what we see is happening in Florida today, my heart goes out to them for sure. But this is also something that we see quite frequently in the Caribbean, and it's also something that we see are increasing both in frequencies, but also in effect on the islands. We are trying to be better prepared by cooperating with other airports. Not only, I'm talking now from the Dutch Caribbean point of view, we have 6 airports, but also we have the French Caribbean, we have the British Caribbean, and we are trying to cooperate with each other to see what can we assist an airport that has been affected by a hurricane or a weather incident that has kind of really caused severe damage to the airport and the infrastructure. And this is something that we continuously is working on. We are trying now to establish a new cooperation now at the end of this year with several of the airports in the Caribbean to actually counter specifically this one. But you have to remember that I think the Caribbean is around 44 million people, and if you look at it as like a half circle, most of the people live in the north, Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, and so on. That's around 35 million. And then you have this string of islands that goes down to South America. And most of these islands are tiny, tiny, tiny. With 50,000 people, 150,000 people, and so on. So, of course, the airports and the infrastructure and the government that runs those airports, they are very small. The resources are scarce, and they are not that... they don't have the capacity to rebuild and so on. So cooperation and partnership most probably is going to be the way of the future, that we need to kind of look into this in a completely different manner, because the future will be, unfortunately, more of these hurricanes. We have seen it over the last couple of years, and they will be much more violent also going forward. I don't know if that answered the question. It is uncertainty.
No. Yes. I mean, I think you've got the kind of the brain cells working and got everybody thinking with that. Thank you. I'd like to bring Amit back into the conversation. So Carlisle Airport Group and the work that you do. I know you operate, you've got your 2D lens and your 3D lens. I would like you, because you can explain it a lot better than I can. Your 2D is development, digitalization, decarbonization. three C's: customer, community, and client. Can you explain that? And which of those is the most important for you, or they're equal in terms of, is it the 2D or the 3C?
Well, it's 3Ds and 3Cs. So when we look at investing and developing projects, we bring what we call our 3D lens to it, which is development that has to work together with decarbonization. How do we affect energy transition? How do we make facilities more resilient? And then digitization, infusing technology and bringing about seamless transformative travel. So that's the 3D lens, and that sort of goes towards, how do we define what we call our project definition? How do we define projects? How do we define our investments? But around that is an entire ecosystem and a stakeholder environment. And the stakeholder environment is then analyzed through what we call the 3 Cs, which is the customer. Who is the customer? The traveling public, the airlines. Who is the client? And typically, when we're looking at investing in airports, you're typically looking at public-private partnerships, and so you've got public sector clients. And so what are the needs of those public sector clients? What are they trying to achieve by bringing in a private partner to help develop and potentially operate their facilities? And finally, the community. How does the community benefit from what we do? Because if the community does not benefit from what we do, then typically a project will not be successful. Airports, we truly believe that airports are a reflection of their communities. And if a community is not reflected and a community is not benefiting from what you're doing, then typically that's not going to be successful. So those are the things that we look for. What's more important? I think they're all equally important, but ultimately what's more important is about community. I spent a lot of time just talking about stakeholder relationships with the community. Why does the community benefit? How does the community benefit? And what can we do to help the community benefit? And I'll give you a couple of examples. We were the lead developer at JFK Airport in New York. JFK, as you know, is the gateway airport, and we're the lead developer of the gateway terminal to JFK, which is the new Terminal 1. It's the largest single standing terminal that's ever been built in the United States at a cost of approximately $10 billion. It's under construction right now. We built a community strategy and a stakeholder strategy where we had full support of the community backing this multi-billion-dollar mega project. We did it by being very, very local and dynamic in the community. It was all about creating jobs in the community. It was about figuring out how do we create capacity in the community to be able to do the multiple things that need to be done. And this is not just about sort of construction jobs. It was about jobs in accountancy, in legal, in non-aeronautical service providing jobs. And it was about building, helping the community build careers, build capacity through this mega construction project. So that's why, I think that is the most important, because without the support of the community, most projects fail.
What are the challenges? They're huge projects. What are the challenges that come with managing those stakeholder relationships, and especially in response to such a dynamic market force?
Yeah, there are multiple challenges. It's it's about having as broad a stakeholder strategy as possible, but then making sure that each of those elements are quite deep. And it's building this echo chamber in the community that says, that basically takes pride in the project. You want to make that, the community needs to view this project as their own. And in order to do that, we spend a lot of time from the very beginning of a project in understanding the community's role and what the community wants. Ultimately, a client, a public sector entity, called a local government, federal government, may want to bring in a private partner, but it may not be. It may not be in congruence with what the community needs. And what we found is by going into the communities, by talking to local leaders, by talking to business groups, by talking to just individuals and doing surveys, we find out what that community really wants. And then how do we then we develop strategies to help deliver that as part of our overall project development. So it is time consuming, it's done, it's multifaceted, it really needs to be a key part of our overall investment strategy.
I'd like to explore that public-private sector a little bit more. And Emre, I mean, what examples have you seen that have shown it to be going in the right direction and working?
Sure, I think, if you compare the standards of airports now, go back 20 years, it's been a great success, PPP. So I think, but one has to be a little careful. Too much of a good thing, then it might turn to a weakness. So I will explain that. So in terms of successful examples, well, how does it work? When you are a company, and if you take a PPP scenario, right? You have government, you have contractors, you have operating companies, and you have passengers, and you have public. These are like simplifying. In that context, when an operating company is preparing for a bid, it's developing very detailed models of revenue and cost. Extremely, because why? Because parties are competing with each other. They want to win the deal. So they want to give the best price for the government, maximum return, and then a good facility. So that forces the operator to be efficient, thinking about service. Because if there is no service, if the passenger is not relaxed, there's not going to be aeronautical retail, And then it's thinking about how can I make my airport efficient, maximize output from employees, but also from the assets. You use IoT, you use technology. That drives a lot of technology improvement. So that's good side. So then the government is happy because they are getting a lot of, instead of paying for the airport is getting done, and then they are getting fees. Contractors are happy because, it's facility. Customers are happy. They are getting a good airport. So I think the things to watch out for, short-term versus long-term. If the operator's perspective is, okay, let's get this, let's get it going, and let's exit, then it's different, okay? So the government needs to do two things to make sure that the operation is effective. One, government needs to have information to manage the relationship because there are contracts and they are static. Operator will say, okay, this is the level, this is what we are doing. If the government doesn't have real-time information what's going on in that airport independently, they will agree. So that means setting up an information system that informs government what's going on so they can monitor that across all airports. That's important. That's short term. The long term, then, the relationship, the deal needs to, because when you are doing a PPP project, you are impacting the future of your economy. It's extremely important. So if the party is, not paying sufficient attention to the future growth, development, because they don't want to spend more, then that's going to be an issue. So the government needs to have a focus. You promise this development, you need to do this, but you cannot delay it, you have to do it, so it's that aspect. And finally, it has to be a win-win for all players. And one player, as you said, the community, the public. So when the mathematical models are done, okay, you have assumptions, okay? So the minimum use assumption is very important. That has to be realistic and representative. If the minimum usage assumption is too excessive, government is happy, contractors are happy, but the taxpayer, they will be funding the difference. So, I think a coordinated, the mission shared by all parties, there is equitable understanding all parties, and a win-win approach including taxpayers, I think is the way forward. And it's good that industry is doing that.
I could see Mr. Ayman nodding in agreement to lots of your points that you made there. I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit further on what you're witnessing in Saudi Arabia and the expansion there in terms of this, and also where that fits into the 2030 and 2050 vision under, under the strong leadership that you have there.
Thank you very much. And I believe the PPP is a great model if you build it right. So, as my colleague says, it's not only one, entity should set the criteria for that PPP model. So usually the PPP must have different aspects. First of all, it should build in a benchmark, successful benchmark. So when you have a figure from similar project or similar activity, so we have at least a guidance. So that benchmark is a guidance, it's not a base sometime. Because you may have different factors that play with the financial model or business model. Second, you need to open that floor for multiple vendor to ensure that you get the best out of that market. Third, you have to have your criteria that you eliminate the lowest and the highest. So if someone is not within the expected range of business model from pricing level, so either he is over promising or he underestimate. So you don't need those. You need to take the reasonable vendor that they understand the business and whatever it takes. Last not least, you have to have a revision. So yeah, we agreed, and it happened several times that we sit with the vendor and we review the contract according to the fair market value, because the market is not sustainable. As you know, there are a lot of factors, like we were talking about, the natural phenomena, geopolitical, economical. There are a lot of factors. And there are a force majeure that might change the whole game rule. So my point here, you have to be agile, that you have a checkpoint every time. So we have to maintain, this is the model of shared revenue, the minimum agreed value. This is how we build it up, and we work as a partner. Because it's not look like that you put someone in a trap and you just, chuck him all the time, milk him. No, it's not that way. He's a partner. He become part of your family. And you need to maintain him, because if he lose, you're going to lose. If he screwed up, you're going to screw up. If he go for bankrupt, your project going to hit the wall. So the point here, even he's a vendor, once you sign a contract, he become a family member. You need to be very careful, and you need to take care of his bottom line. He should work in a profitability. But that does not mean you spoil the vendor. So my point, it's a balance, that you build it in a very professional manner. That's from my point of view. So I think, the PPP is a great, once it's built in a right platform, on a right manner, on a balanced. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard this morning, we've touched on green and decarbonisation of the aviation industry. Jonny, would you say that the industry is stepping forward in terms of sustainability at the pace that we need? And what will it really take to enact a real change? We talk about it a lot. Are we going to hit those benchmarks?
I get this question quite often, and my answer is always just transition, because we are rich countries, we are rich markets, we are also poorer areas and regions. And sometimes we see that initiatives, like for example in the European Union, on long-haul flights, for example, there are discussions about increasing fees and taxes for travel with long-haul flights. And if you look at some of the communities that these long-haul flights are flying to, like for example in the Caribbean, or to maybe some of the very distant islands in the French Republic, or others, also in the British, those countries are completely dependent on tourism. And by raising the taxes, sustainability taxes, for example, you may have an effect on the impact on the smaller communities out there on the islands that are very, very small is completely different than what it has over here. So when you are saying, are we kind of, is this progressing on in the right pace? Yes, I think we are pushing and we need to push, but we need to make it that everybody needs to get on board. Everybody needs to be part of it. And we need to be very careful about just focusing on let's say, the European Union or the US or the richer countries, because what we decide here has a lot of effect on the smaller communities and the poorer communities and countries throughout the world. I worked in Africa for 3 years. I worked in Kenya. I seen a lot, like from how the effect of some of the decisions that we are taking among the richer countries, like on the taxation and the fees and so on, and how it affects, cargo, flower business, like in tourism and so on in the smaller communities. And it's children and it's women and it's young people that work in those industries, and them having fewer tourists or business visitors coming to those countries. It has a huge effect on them, much, much more than what you see here. Now I'm talking a little bit about what I'm my passion here. So okay.
No. I was just going to expand on that to say, next month we'll see COP29 taking place in Baku in Azerbaijan. This is going to be, one of the kind of high-up topics on the agenda. In terms of decarbonize, I mean, it's been dubbed the finance COP. Who is ultimately responsible? Who has to take charge? You mentioned there are the richer countries, but how do we enact that change? How do we get everybody around the table to make the necessary decisions to take us forward?
Oh, if I knew that answer, I wouldn't do what I do today.
Put you on the spot today, haven't I?
No, but it's just like, I mean, like, if you look at the taxation in general, let's say in the European Union or in the globe, I think IATA came out with a survey last year where they say that taxes and charges on an airline ticket represent something like 15% in average. In the Caribbean or in Africa, it's more than 30%. More than 30%. And that makes it, what can I say, how do you address that? Like, and adding more taxes to it will mean that the poorer countries again and the industry in those countries will even suffer more, making them not able to invest in new technology, making them able to invest in new technology that has to do with, sustainable aviation, aircrafts, even seamless travel, because the tickets are getting so expensive that it's nearly no market left. And we are seeing so much bankruptcies, for example, in the Caribbean of airlines. I can't make it between the inter-island travel and so on, because the market is so tough to operate in. So for me, it's like this just transition. It has to do with taxation. It has to do what is the effect on your destination or the country that you are kind of sending your aircrafts to. So you may tax in Germany, but Lufthansa, when they are flying to somewhere in the Caribbean or in Africa, the effect is actually also happening there. And we are maybe focusing too much, on ourselves, sorry to say, but... Yeah.
Thank you. Great points. We're running into our last 5 minutes, so I'm going to give you each just over a minute. I'm going to ask the same question, but I'm going to start with you, Amit. If you could describe first for me what you think is going to be the biggest thing that is going to revolutionize the travel ecosystem in the next 3 to 5 years.
I'm going to give you two things, though. The first one, I think, is going to be all around AI. I think artificial intelligence is going to have a significant impact on the travel ecosystem, not only in terms of how passengers access airports, how airlines deal with passengers and customers, but it's going to have an impact on retailing, on food and beverage, on the ability to make airport operations more efficient. And I'll give you a very small example of that. We have a company in our portfolio that does apron management systems. In fact, it started off as an airfield lighting company, one of the largest airfield lighting companies in the world, but is transitioning into apron management systems. And it's using AI to essentially make the ramp, the apron, more efficient and safer. And that is just the start of what it's trying to do. The other thing I think is going to be around energy transition. I think the amount of energy that is being consumed, that will be consumed by technology, by data, and the amount of energy that data centers are going to require is going to put significant amount of pressure on our infrastructure, especially our airport infrastructure, but consume a lot of energy. So airports need to start to think about that energy transition and how that energy transition is going to take place so that they can build in resiliency now.
Thank you. Emre.
So yeah, I mean, fully agree, but I don't want to repeat the same thing. I fully agree with AI impact. So let me try to add some other points. The first point is that I kind of think two things, I think, really. First is, as we've seen last 2 days, I mean, start with airlines, the focus is shifting from the seat to end-to-end travel. So what that means is airlines are seeing the opportunity to work with different partners and focus on retail, focus on experience, just like airports. So I think that is an important step because the usual push and pull between airline and airport, oh, customer, I own customer, you can't, I won't share my data, that will have to go away for that to happen. And that's going to be a big change for the industry. Of course, needless to say, you have electrification, you have decarbonization, you have different aircraft types coming on board. You have air mobility, very important. It's like baby steps now, but it will gradually integrate into the flows. And I think, for instance, on the cargo side now, you have airport community solutions. You have airlines, airports, cargo, freight forwarder, customs. Instead of everybody optimizing within themselves, each of these entities, they got great digital IT, but still paper goes round. The lead time reduced over the past 50 years from 6.1 days to 5.8 days. If you compare this with Amazon, with Alibaba, like in US 1 day, in China 1 day, whole world in 3 days, the rest of the industry, where are we now? 6 days, there's a problem. So if airlines and airports watches these developments, they'll be left behind. They'll be taken over. So what that means is different parties are collaborating on open platforms. So that means more collaborative approach to deliver end-to-end service in terms of, values, change management, technology, supporting it. I think that will be the great game changer.
Thank you. Ayman, anything to add on to that? I'm sure you do.
I cannot agree anymore that AI, big data, as well as the sustainable aviation fuel. So I may elaborate in both points. First of all, AI and big data will take a major place in changing the whole passenger journey. So it will become something, very enjoyable, rather than it's hectic today and part of the, suffering for the passenger. And it will help to increase the revenue by knowing the behavioral and the intention by that analysis. And it will help to increase safety and security. So I don't want to drill down there, but I believe big data, AI, will take a place to drive this industry toward best efficient utilization and optimization, the quality of services, and to hit the best, highest, enhanced passenger experience. Second, for the sustainable aviation fuel, which is the energy that we're talking about. Solar, wind is great, but it's not reliable. So I believe that there will be a new sustainable aviation fuel. It might be the hydrogen, I'm not sure, but it seems to be the hydrogen, because what we have is an intermediate solution, transition solution. It's not a permanent yet. That required an investment, regulation change, and innovation in designing the new aircraft, designing the new machinery toward the right utilization for that energy.
Which is financially viable for the whole industry, I'm taking at the same
Indeed.
time. Okay, Jonny, you've got about 30 seconds. Anything to add? Last word from you.
I want to be very short. I'm just saying this one. Continue travel. The job that you guys have here, you are part of the most important industry in the world right now, because, we are looking at a world that is closing down in many ways. We are seeing so much disruptions, airspace being closed and so on. Continue traveling. That's how we can get these technologies and get these opportunities that we have been talking about today to actually be delivered, because somebody is using them. And share your experience with others on the other side, and let them share your experiences and so on. Thank you so much for having us, me. Thank you so much, Jane.
Jonny, Amit, Emre, and Ayman, thank you so much for a fantastic panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together.